This is A Story of Sorts, the podcast mostly about bookish stuff, and I am your host, Karina Pereira. Hello everyone! On this episode, I chat with Aurora Dominguez about her career as a journalist and as a teacher, about mental health, the current book buying bans, and the importance of reading for youth. Have a listen. Aurora, welcome to A Story of Sorts.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I would like you to introduce yourself to the listeners. Who is Aurora?
So Aurora, who is me? I am actually a journalist. I've been a journalist for many years. That's what I went to school for. But I years ago also became an educator. So I teach high school and college. I teach 10th grade English research writing. And when it comes to universities, I teach different courses when it comes to mass communications. I used to work at newspapers and magazines. You know how things are nowadays for that lovely job, but it's changed so much. I was, an editor and writer for Where Magazine, the Miami Herald. And then I decided to transition my career to education. And of course, I cannot give up journalism because I love it. So I still write on the side, which I feel is like the perfect balance.
And do you think how do you see the future of magazines nowadays?
So for me, remember when we were like younger and we were so excited to get that magazine subscription in the mail?
For sure.
I remember like YM and 17 and Bop with all those cute posters. And I even had a chance to be the senior web editor for J14 magazine, which was one of those really cute pop culture magazines. Listen, I adore magazines, but just seeing what's been happening with publications like Entertainment Weekly, for example, that have been seizing publication, I feel like we're going digital, like we've heard for so many years. I do think, I hope that some magazines still like hang out, because I feel like we all have that nostalgia of going to the airport or going wherever, the supermarket, and grabbing a publication. But I do feel like the industry itself is evolving. It's going to continue to evolve. And it is certainly not what it used to be when I was an editor and writer. Same with newspapers. They're thin now. Like there's not enough content. And I feel like creatives such as journalists and writers have had to find other avenues for their career. They still write, they still do what they need to do. And I'm so proud of my newsroom friends that are still hanging on. But even they tell me it's very different now. So I don't think journalism is ever going to go away, ever. I feel like we always need to know what's going on. We need to have honest content out there. But unfortunately, some of the print products might kind of not be there as much anymore. That's how
do you think they're also like losing value because people tend to see digital things as kind of free? So people will not want to pay for digital stuff.
They never want to pay for the paywalls. And they just want to go get free content. And at the same time, there's a staffing shortage. Like there's not enough budget to hire the type of journalist that you could hire, say, 10 years ago. So I feel like that's also changing the atmosphere of, say, a newsroom. I mean, I remember being in a newsroom, like a downtown newsroom with all the writers, all the editors, and just that energy of sharing creative ideas and just coming up with stories and having all those meetings. That's pretty much not happening now. I know for my colleagues in the Miami Herald, they work from home now. Ever since the pandemic, they don't have a newsroom anymore. And that makes me a little sad because I really loved that experience. But it's just the way the world is changing. Definitely.
Yeah, because even publications like, for example, recently Bitch Media, they just closed up. And they've been having trouble for a while, but you would think, well, they will, muddle through and make it.
And no matter what, it always makes me like sad. It's like, wow, for sure. That's so sad. Definitely. And it's that thing that as a journalist, with the recession of like 2008 and, a lot of us, I've learned to be laid off many times in my career. Wow. And I've learned to pick myself up and just keep going and find the job that was right for me. That's why now being an educator, I adore it. That's number one. I love teaching. And number two, I can still write on the side and I don't have that fear where, oh, my job might go away at any moment. It's a normal fear. Exactly.
For sure. And I would like to actually start by asking you about your career as a writer. Was this something you always wanted to do, even growing up?
Oh my God, yes. So I remember I grew up in Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Um, and I literally spent most of my time writing. I wrote for like the third grade, believe it or not, third grade school paper.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and it was, poems and lunch lists, but I worked for that newspaper. Then I became editor of the CBS Impulse in my school, which at the time, you had little pages and you taped them and then you printed them. It was, technologically advanced. But all of that taught me how to have like that precision, like how to have deadlines. And I always loved writing because I was always a big book reader. So I remember reading Sweet Valley Twins, and Elizabeth loved journalism. I'm like, that's so cool. So I just loved writing. I come from a creative family. My uncle, who passed away a few years ago, he was always encouraging me to write, so I kept writing. To the point that I became the film critic, like the youngest film critic in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Wow.
I was a film critic at the San Juan Star, which is not around anymore. It's around, but in a different entity. But that was the newspaper where Hunter S. Thompson worked at with the
Mhm.
Rum Diary.
Wow.
So that was like the legend. Everybody talked about that. And I became, wow, I was what you would call a copy girl. So I would help reporters and editors fill in for stories.
How old
Um,
were you then?
I was like 20,
Okay, wow.
and I was pursuing my bachelor's degree at Sagrado Corazon, Sacred Heart University in Puerto Rico. So I was always very driven. I was like, I want a part-time job. Let's go to the newsroom and show up and come with all my clips and let's do it. And I was very lucky that I was able to get a job in a newsroom when I was like 20. And
Yeah.
I just kept going and going. And I wrote for a lot of places in Puerto Rico, like Castellano Communications. And then I just knew that was something I always wanted to do. So I really focused on it. And the reason I moved to Miami in 2004 is because I got a scholarship to go to Florida International University for bilingual journalism, which is
Oh,
Spanish
okay.
English journalism.
Yeah.
And that led to so many opportunities as a journalist. And at that time, 2004, 5, I feel like journalism was thriving. It was still like, it still had that edge of like print with a mix of we're trying to figure out the online world. And I just kept going. So that's why I just really love journalism since I was a kid.
So,
Definitely.
so that was always your idea, because I'm asking because a lot of writers want to write specifically fiction. You wanted specifically to be a
Yes,
journalist from the
I
beginning.
always wanted to be a journalist. Of course, all of us want to write fiction. That's a goal that I've had for myself forever.
Mhm.
But I always wanted to be that person in the newsroom or like that magazine editor. Like it was just a goal for me. So I was very happy that I was able to reach those goals.
And what did you cover as a journalist? The
Oh,
topics, maybe a lot of things, but
so many
like in the
things.
broad,
I
broad.
remember when I started, it was a lot of business, and maybe, like film criticism was one of my first things. So that was more features. I also covered an array of like hard news when I started at the San Juan Star because I feel like they wanted to give me a bit of everything.
Mhm.
And then one of the best things that I covered in San Juan was I interviewed Benicio del Toro, the actor,
Wow.
and he was great. He's got Puerto Rican roots. Like
Okay.
he's got a big Puerto Rican background. And then for Castellano Communications, I covered like a J Lo concert back in the day.
So cool.
Um, so that really made me realize that it made my editors realize that I was really good with features and pop culture. So when I went to the Lakeland Ledger after I graduated in 2005, I became a feature reporter and I was about 23. So my job was to cover arts and relationships. So I covered art all over Lakeland, Florida, which is in between Tampa and Orlando. um so I was really young and I was like covering concerts, art galleries, local music scene, teens, like what are teens doing in the city, in the area. So I really love features, which is what led me to later on the Miami Herald, where I was the assistant editor for Miami.com. That was so much fun because we got to cover like the food festivals, the art scene in Miami, the music scene in Miami. So I always loved covering that.
Yeah.
um And I got to interview some cool people like Panic at the Disco back in the day, Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance,
Well,
so
jealous.
all of them. And I feel like I liked covering those type of interviews and stories because I like to give them an angle where, yeah, you're a musician, yeah, you're an actor, but what else is there to you? You
Yeah.
know? So I always try to find the humane behind, say, like the person that's in the magazines or tabloids all the time. Like I always try to dig into who they are, why are they who they are. And I feel like that was the interesting part of interviewing these people
Mm-hmm.
that might be in the spotlight, but are really, people that have other goals and other perspectives. So that was fun.
For sure. And what was the most important thing that you have learned as a journalist? And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the job, but on the job.
On the job, one of the things I've learned that is completely important is you need to have flexibility for sure, because you might be 100% prepared for a story and you're ready to interview. Anything can happen. I don't know, they change your time or you have to wait or you get lost while you're going there. So many things happen that you have to be flexible. You need to learn to have good contacts. Say you're running late, call them, text them, always be the type of person that knows they have to do their job and
Mm-hmm.
try your best. But say in a city like Miami, things happen. There's always like people running late and stuff like that. And it's not just the flexibility of time, it's also the flexibility of be flexible with yourself, because while you're interviewing somebody, the questions might change and that's okay.
Yes.
And it
Yeah.
might go a different direction. So I think that's one thing that I learned from the career, just to be flexible and to be very much much as I could be organized as to what I'm doing throughout the week as much as I can. That way I don't forget. And I know
Yeah.
that sounds silly, but I am a planner girl. Yeah, we might have a phone. Fine. I like to write things down. It just makes me like remember what I have to do.
Yeah, for sure. And especially like we also want those conversations to be fluid and to kind of,
Oh my God, to kind of like flow. Exactly.
yeah.
Be more conversational, not just like sitting there not knowing
Yeah,
what you're
no,
going
for
to ask
sure.
them. And always, I mean, it might be old school, but if I'm going to do an interview, I always take little notes, like, the reporter's notebook back in the
Yeah.
day. But yes, I think it's so great now that we have the ability to record and that sort of thing, because I remember that was harder back in the day with a little tape decks. That was harder.
So did you
Um,
still use like the notebooks instead of like a recording system?
I
So
do both, but the notebook to me is so crucial because I feel like I just write things down, even if it's like crazy handwriting, and then I can go back to the audio and kind of compare and contrast
yeah,
what I got. Hmm.
because I'm always amazed when I see like older pictures usually or videos of people actually writing down the interviews. Like, how can they write that fast
Oh,
and continue to listen? It's really something that
I
you have to
know.
train,
It's
right?
so crucial. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely.
And do you miss Puerto Rico? Like, do you go home
I
often
do.
or?
I go home, for example, my parents are in town this week because I won teacher of the year at my high school, which is
Wow!
amazing. Yeah,
Congratulations!
thank
Yeah.
you. So they're here for like a little event tonight. I actually went to Puerto Rico for Easter weekend. I try to go back as much as I can, let it be once or twice a year, just because my parents are there, my grandparents are there, they're in their 80s, 90s. So I do miss the island, which is why I try to go back. And it's like 2 hours away from South Florida on a flight,
It's
not
not
too
that
bad.
far. Yeah.
And I do like to just be there and experience, go back, because I was born and raised there till I was about 22. So it's always nice to go back. But I'm very thankful for my opportunities here. I feel like I grew so much when I moved to South Florida. I'm happy here. This is home now. But Puerto Rico will always be home as well.
Yeah, no, I feel I'm an immigrant as well. I mean, an immigrant. I
Yeah, you
emigrated for another
understand.
country, but completely different. But yeah, it's you kind of feel in a sense that you have your roots in some place as well. Even
And
though
you have
I love being where I am.
it's always good to go back to your roots.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's kind of see your culture again and
Oh,
enjoy
so
it.
important. So important.
So you are also a teacher now,
Yes, I
and
am.
what do you teach?
I teach AP Seminar, ACE Global Perspectives, and ACE General Paper, which if you put them all together, they're research and writing courses. They teach students how to present They present their papers, their research papers. So it teaches them a lot of valuable life skills, not just for their job, but just how to stand in front of a room and explain your research, which is
Mhm.
so important. And then the ACE General Paper course is more about learning about the world, current events. What are things happening in the world that they need to understand from different perspectives and lenses? So once they know about different things, I kind of teach them different things in the school year, like read this, analyze the news, that sort of thing. Because once they take, for example, one part of the exam, they need to pick one prompt and write an essay about it
Okay.
without sources. So they need to remember
Wow.
they've learned. I love it because as a writer, like it's so fun to teach them, that type of thing. And then next school year, my principal asked me to take over the school news magazine. So
Yeah. So you're going back to a magazine.
yeah,
So
with a
cool.
bunch of kiddos. I'm so excited. I cannot wait. I feel
That's
like it's coming full circle. So I'll still teach my class, but I'll have one period a day where I have journalism kids. So
that
I'm
is
so
really
excited.
cool.
I'm so excited.
Because the only reason why you decided to become a teacher was because of job stability, right?
Definitely. That's number one. And number two, I really fell in love with teaching when I got kind of mid laid off at the Miami Herald back in '08. During that recession when they started cutting hours in 2008, 2009. And my husband actually encouraged me to teach. He was right. He like saw it in me, and I started teaching university first, all these adults.
Wow.
I was freaking out because I was like 26 and here I am teaching a university class.
Yeah.
Um, I was nervous that first day. Oh my God. But I did it. I loved it. I started doing it part-time throughout my career as a writer. So I started teaching for FIU, Miami-Dade College, different institutions in South Florida. And then one day when I was working for J14 magazine in 2015, I was working from home. I was a little depressed. I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like it was fun, but coming from covering like meaty features to covering clickbait, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like write the story, write that story, write 20 stories a day. I felt like a machine. I didn't feel like a writer anymore. That's when I made the decision. I started getting certified in the state of Florida. I got my first teaching job as a high school educator in 2015, 16, and I landed at Boca High, and I've been there since, and I love it. I love the kids. I love the environment. I realized that, yeah, working from home is cool and stuff, but I'm the type of person that needs engagement, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
love hanging out with the kids. I love seeing the reactions. And I feel like now I can pursue two passions, not only one. And it makes me very happy.
And do you find it easy to conciliate the writing and the teaching?
I love it. The cool thing is, I can bring those pieces of, like, say I write a book riot story, or I write a review for book list, and I'm an English teacher, so I have books in my classroom. The kids love reading some of my stories, and I feel like being a journalist on the side, I can bring those experiences into the classroom because it keeps me up to date with what's going on. And I also bring the new skills, how the new
Yeah.
way journalism is evolving. I can bring that to the kids so they get that experience.
Talk me. I want to talk to you about the your fiction writing, because that I
Yes.
don't know about, of course, because I read
Yeah.
your articles on Book
So
Riot. Talk to me about it.
I'm so excited. I wrote the first 4 or 5 chapters of a book. It's Latin E, it's like Puerto Rican all the way, with a Puerto Rican character, and it's gonna be YA because I love YA. And I actually sent those few chapters to a competition called Las Musas,
Mm-hmm.
and I got selected by the author Diana Rodriguez Wallace, and she's gonna help me for the next 6 months, just like once a month or every couple weeks. She's gonna give me tips, ideas. She's gonna help me kind of keep going with the manuscript, which is really exciting.
And did you
Um,
have this idea already for a while, or
I've
how did
always
it?
had it. I've always had it. I just feel like I had that split in the brain, like journalism writing. So getting into fiction writing is such a different world.
Yeah.
So I had to like allow myself that freedom to write just for that fiction writing, like write what you want to write.
Yeah.
And just like Diana told me, she was like, just keep writing. Like the first draft is not going to be perfect, but that's where editing comes in. And I feel like that was the thing that scared me. about fiction writing, just like letting go of all those rules. You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
for
The
sure.
inverted pyramid. Oh, God, no, just do you. So
Yeah.
now I try to like split my brain and just get myself in the zone to do fiction. And I hope it goes well, but you know what? I got to give it a shot.
No, for sure. And I mean, if you have fun while doing it, do you tend to plan a lot of your stories, or do you kind of
For which
like
one?
just
For
go
like
with it?
journalism? For like my book write and stuff?
No, I mean for fiction.
Oh, for fiction.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. When I started writing these chapters, I just kind of went with the flow of what I wanted to write. But I do want to somehow, like now that I have those first few chapters, I do want to somehow plan a little more. Because like Diana told me, she's like, it's good to have some ideas as to where your characters are going.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a perfect planning situation. But that's something that I want to learn, definitely.
And do you know more or less a story, or can you reveal like
Yeah,
anything of
so
it?
I'm sure you remember Hurricane Maria in 2017, which was a
Oh
hurricane.
yeah, yeah.
Oh my God, it destroyed the island in 2017. It was crazy. So I've had the experience of seeing how many Puerto Ricans have left the island even more than ever after Maria. But my story does not necessarily circle around Maria, but it kind of focuses on that feeling as a Puerto Rican, where yes, you are part of the United States, but you're a completely different culture.
Hmm.
And so many people see the American dream as the end all be all, while
Yeah.
there's other people in the island that kind of look down on the people that want to leave because they feel that the people should stay and just bring their talents to Puerto Rico. But at the same time, the pay is low. There's government corruption. There's so many things that drive young people, especially, to pursue careers and university experiences outside of the island.
Hmm.
Um, my character is going to be torn between that, like, should I stay or should I go? She has a friend, also love interest, that might be looking down at the fact that she wants to leave. So that right there is like those two perspectives of that passion, of like having that passion of your culture but also wanting to seek greener pastures. And is that greener pasture, is that really the
Greener.
is it greener? Is it the dream that you should pursue? So that's what I'm trying to work on right now.
That is very interesting. I think a lot of people will see themselves in that, because I
And
do
like
think,
relate.
yeah, then when you leave a place, like I said, that you do always have that duality, or where do I belong, and was this the right choice, etc.
Yes, should I have done that? That sort of thing. Definitely.
So we're waiting for it.
I'm so excited.
In 2015, if
Uh-huh.
I'm correct, you covered the Jurassic World press junket in
Oh my
Hawaii.
God. Best time
How
ever.
was that?
Best time ever. I was working for J14 magazine, and my editor knew that I had like the feature reporting background. And not to mention, like, I loved covering that type of stuff. So she was awesome. Like, that's one good thing about J14 magazine. She literally sent me the email and was like, you should go. Like, I want you to go. So Universal pretty much sent me to Hawaii, which was my first time there. And one of the coolest things was getting to interview Bryce Dallas Howard, who
Ooh,
is
wow.
Queen. Not to mention, she's created some of the best Star Wars, like Mandalorian episodes ever. But she was so great. I got to see the island. I got to meet some amazing people that I still talk to today. And it was just wonderful to be there talking to all these people. There's actually some videos on my website that I still have from that time. And I feel like that was a once in a lifetime experience. I loved it.
Who else did you interview?
I
Do you
interviewed
remember?
the two younger kiddos. One of them is now, like, he became the actor of the film Love, Simon.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
interviewed him. He's fantastic.
Cool.
Because his career really blew up
Yeah,
after
for
the
sure.
movie, and he was extremely sweet. I loved interviewing him. So I interviewed them, and that was a lot of fun. I have to send you the videos. They're fun. They're
Yeah,
fun.
like the whole experience sounds super cool.
Yeah, it was great.
You're also a cosplayer. Would you like to share that with us? What do you cosplay? How did you start cosplaying?
I just really love comic books and books, and I'm a total nerd by pride and love. So I feel like in part when I was in my 20s, I was very jaded. I was like, why should I really be myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
no,
I was
yeah.
kind of, especially being a journalist, I had to follow certain like I don't know, like crowds, and I was more insecure in my 20s. I was still learning, I was still growing to learn who I am, but I always had this deeply embedded love of everything nerdy. So I started really getting into movies and books and everything that relates to different characters. What I love is the fact that I would dress up, and I dressed up like as Harley Quinn, Wonder Woman, like all those characters that I love. And one thing that I love is just going to cons like New York Comic Con, Florida SuperCon in Florida. And I feel like cosplaying is a way of freedom because you can be who you are. And as my parents said when I took them to Puerto Rico Comic Con 2 weeks ago, I went there, I took them. They were like, wow, there's like no judgment here. Like you can just be
Yeah.
yourself. And I'm like, yes, that's what I love about cosplaying. You can be yourself. You can have fun. There's creativity behind it. And then you meet other people that love the characters you love. And it's just wonderful. I love that scene.
Yeah, I think you make a very good connection with fandom. Like when
Yes.
you find that in common, like the love you have for those characters, what they represent to you.
100%. So, so true.
Do
So
you
true.
do you have like a favorite cosplay from all the
Uh,
cosplays?
I would say one of my favorite ones that I did years ago was definitely Wonder Woman. My friend took pictures of me as Wonder Woman. And then I did the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey, like the overalls.
Mhm.
Oh, and my husband just gave these to me. So see, my Legos cosplay. So that's me
Oh,
as a
yeah.
journalist. I'm also a Lego. So that's me. I mean, if you guys can see it, I'm wearing like a little suit, like a little cute suit. That's my journalism one. And this is Miss D. I'm a teacher. Cute,
So
right?
that's really cool. So
So
basically
like
you
my
just
husband remembers we couldn't really cosplay that much in New York Comic Con due to the fact that it had just come back because of the pandemic,
yeah.
which is a little more difficult. But we still had like nerdy stuff on. But our Legos cosplayed, and we took
Yeah.
pictures that I will send you. I will show you of our Legos cosplaying. So see, we went there. Like our
So
Legos.
it's kind of like an extra step. Not only do like you have the Lego and it's not just like, oh, it's a Wonder Woman Lego. No, it's you
It's me as a Lego.
as
There
as
you go.
Lego.
Exactly. So cute. So
I have
fun.
my boyfriend is also a Lego nerd. So
Oh, my husband, you should see. He has some amazing sets like Daily Bugle, like all this great stuff.
that's really cool. Now I'm gonna talk about something that is more serious.
Yeah.
Because you have bipolar disorder and you wrote a story for Worthy magazine about it.
Yes, I wrote one for Worthy, and I've also written some for Book Riot, which is so amazing.
And you won
Um,
a prize for the one at Worthy
yeah, I
magazine,
won an
right?
award for the one that I wrote. I won a South Florida SPJ award for that one. Yeah, you know, I feel like anxiety and everything I go through is like something to embrace, honestly. I feel like I don't want to hide it. It's who I am. And people will know if I have a bad or good day. I have friends that are very understanding, and we have like a little text chat. And if I'm feeling like low, they know. I feel like that's important to have those connections, especially when you have anxiety or bipolar disorder, because your mood will swing. Your mood
Yeah.
will literally be like happy, sad. Like that's the thing. My doctor has been seeing me since 2008. He was the one that diagnosed me. I feel like one of the struggles with being a person that deals with mental health issues is finding the right balance and the right medication.
Mhm.
That's been a challenge. I kind of spiraled a little bit in October of 2021 because I got off a certain medication that was not working for me. It happens. And then it began, like trying to find the right medicine. So I started getting really, really manic, really depressed. There were days I called off work. I just did not have the energy. And then my doctor realized that was going on, and he started me on a new medication. And so far, so good. I've been feeling more like myself since January, which is good. But that's the daily struggle. Like
Yeah.
you don't know. But I'm happy to talk about it and write stories about it because I want people to know they can live normal lives and they can have goals and they can have careers. Yes, it might be considered a disability, but I don't see it that way. I see it like something that makes me stronger. And if you have the right care and if you have the right people that know that you
Yeah.
have, don't hide it. People need to know. That's my perspective. I know there's a stigma with mental health, But the more open you are about it, I'm not saying telling people everything, but
Yeah.
the more open you are about your challenges, the more people can notice if you've been triggered. See what I
Yeah.
mean? Because
Yeah, no, for
sometimes,
sure.
yes, because that's a safety. That right there is safety. If you feel like you've been triggered, a close friend, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband will know. And that's why I like to tell my story, and students relate to it too, because a lot of them go through anxiety and issues like that.
Yeah. But
But
it's
yeah,
also, I'm
yeah,
supposing it's also easier to deal with things that's going on if people around you know about it,
yeah,
because
yeah.
then they can understand, right?
Because if not, they don't get it. So it's kind of like, because when I didn't know, I didn't know. Then when I
Yeah.
knew, I felt like I could understand more what was going on with anxiety and everything else.
And
Yeah.
don't you feel like extra vulnerable when you talk about it, when you
Oh my
write
God,
about
for
it?
sure, for sure. But one thing that is wonderful is the fact that I've had people send me a note or send me an email or send me a text like, thanks for talking about that. Like, I need people to talk about that because it makes me relate. So
Yeah.
many people are struggling with these things and they just are afraid to say it. So when they see somebody else talk about it, they feel connections.
And I also feel like, I don't know, I think sometimes we are a bit of in a bubble, and you are in a bubble with people who talk openly about mental illness. But I do think that there is, as you said, a lot of stigma around it. And there are a lot
Yes,
of people
yes.
dealing with mental illness.
Especially in the Hispanic community. I'm not gonna even
Yeah.
lie. It's very much like they don't understand that it's something that could be very, very serious. They're more like, oh, you'll get over it, or
Yeah.
you don't, you're fine. It's just a
Just need
bad
to be
day.
optimistic.
Just I'm like, okay, those are good tricks, fine, you have to try to be optimistic every day, but when it becomes an issue that it interferes with your daily life, you have to take care of it.
Of course. And I get a bit, because I have a feeling also that Portugal is a bit like that. Like, people don't really talk much. I think now they do. They talk more about burnout and stuff. But people
Burnout.
do, especially older people, they tend to dismiss it as in like, oh, in my time that didn't exist because you didn't have time to think about it. Like,
Yes,
yep, it did exist. It's just like with everything else that people said didn't exist as much. It was just kind
yeah.
of shut down and ignored, and had, of course, terrible consequences for people. But even nowadays, like, I know people who, even the family is a
Mhm.
bit embarrassed even of the
I
situations. Like,
know.
why do you have to be open about it? You can have like your disability, or you can have your mental illness, whatever,
And
however
you
you want to
can,
label it, but
you
don't
can
talk
just
about it,
yeah, and the
right?
way like you can be honest about it. You have no idea how many people have come to me and opened up because they see me
Yeah.
as someone that they can talk to, because they know I'm not embarrassed. I don't care. This is who I am. Like, I've reached this point in my life where it's like, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. I will be there for you. And if you need to talk, I'm here.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to hide who I am. It's like, it's so powerful when you reach that point,
Yeah,
right? You're
but
like,
for
don't.
sure. And that's why I find so important that you talk about it, because like I said, for you and maybe for me, might be very
It's
simple,
vulnerable.
obvious
Oh, yeah.
things, right?
Oh,
It's like, oh,
yeah.
this, but I'm in your sense is like, why, yeah, I should talk about it. But for a lot of people, they still think that they shouldn't talk about it. And then when people in their families and stuff who need that support, they don't have it because they don't think it should be talked about.
Yes, and it creates like a cycle,
Yeah,
a
it's
cycle of
it's
people. That's the hardest part. I feel like people really struggle with fear, and fear can be really tough to overcome.
for
I know for a
sure.
fact I have moments that I'm scared of stuff, but I feel like as I've gotten older, I realized, why not now? Like, why not talk about it now? I even recorded a video at my school. They have something called Motivational Mondays. Um, and it was a whole video about me as a teacher struggling with bipolar
Yeah.
disorder, how I got over it. And they played this, like, on the school news that they do once a week. And I had so many students come to me like, thanks for saying that, because I struggle with A, B, or C.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So yes, it's vulnerable. It's hard to talk about for sure. But once you accept it and you realize, this is who I am and I'm trying to get better. For me, my goal is to help others. I feel like that's something that, as a teacher, as a person, just as who I am, I want to help others understand it's not the end of the world. You're
Yeah.
going to be okay.
And
Definitely.
do you have any advice for people who are now struggling with the whole thing, like from,
Yeah.
finding help to
My
coming out
advice,
about it?
my biggest advice for them, because I was very lucky that my then fiance, now husband, was always supportive, and he noticed that there was some ups and downs for me, which happened throughout like my whole life. I just had no idea what it
Yeah.
was, you know. My advice is try to find at least one person you confide in. It doesn't have to be necessarily a family member. It could be a friend. It could be anybody that you feel close to. And if you're scared to open up about the situation, find someone that you can kind of bounce that thought process with. I feel like that's something that helped me, just talking to someone about how I felt, and admitting that I needed to get help, and being afraid of getting that help is always normal. But once you bounce out, once you kind of talk all those ideas through, um, I feel like once you find that confident, you're going to feel so much better.
Now, I would like to talk about books. Of course.
Yes.
When did books come into the picture? Like, did you read as a child?
Oh, yes, definitely. I was that nerd with books, like on my, like the emotional support book in my bag on the my aunt's always a big reader. She's the one that gave me the first like Sweet Valley Twins book. My mom would always read to me like all the cute little Disney stories when I was a kid. I didn't stop reading. I just read forever. I feel like in my 20s, I went through like a little slump because I was so busy with my journalism career. But then one of my friends gave me Twilight. Yeah, Twilight is not the best piece of literature, but it's fun, and it got me reading again. So I just kept going. And I used to be more of a contemporary reader. And then when I started reading that, I kind of did both fantasy and contemporary, which is really fun. So I've always been a reader. It's just the way I am shaped, for sure.
And what do you enjoy reading the most? What kind of genre, authors?
I love YA. I feel like YA has gotten so much better than like R.L. Stine back in the day. I love diverse books. I love seeing the fact that there's more LGBTQ. There's books about everything now. Oh my God, please keep them coming. Give me characters that we can relate to as people, that my teens can relate to at school. So I love reading pretty much everything YA, in the sense that I'm a teacher, 10th grade, and I like to bring those stories to my students. Like, oh my God, I read this awesome book. So I become their book talk. Seriously, they say that. I'm like their live book talk. I'm like, hey, read this, read that. Also, I love adult fantasy. I feel like they're so lush and the world building is fantastic. And I also love reading books that I like finding a good standalone. Does that make sense? Like, you find a good standalone?
For sure, because I'm a standalone person. I don't have a lot of patience for series, so yes.
Yeah, and right now, there's this author I love, Tiffany D. Jackson. She goes Grown. Oh my God, she's amazing, and she writes the best standalones. And I love those thrillers, kind of dark books.
The only I've read from her was White Smoke.
Wonderful.
Did you read their upcoming already?
I am reading it now. The one that
is it okay? Is it good?
Listen, it's like it's so good. She spun Carrie by Stephen King. Like, it's literally, it's got those Carrie vibes, and I love the fact that she has this element of suspense. She's great at suspense writing. So she also, like, her books, besides of course reading like horror by R.L. Stine and mysteries when I was younger, I love those thriller books too. Like, I love that type of story that's a little out there, and she's great. I love the way she writes her stories.
Yeah, because I really liked White Smoke, but then I was thinking, should I request the next one on Edelweiss, because it was fun. I kind of wanted to know what people were saying about it.
I urge you to. I literally have it in my bag as my emotional support book right now.
Okay, because I gotta check, because I'm very picky with horror. Like,
me too.
One type of horror,
Me too. Like, some of it is fantastic, some of it I'm like, not so good.
Exactly.
Fantastic. I highly recommend you picking it up.
Okay, great. As soon as we're done, I'm going to Edelweiss running.
Do it.
And now, what is your opinion on the impact of books in youth?
Huge. There's nothing else to say but huge, and I'm going to elaborate. I am seeing more reading now in my classroom than I saw years ago, like maybe a couple years ago, because students, like, I wrote a story for Book Riot about this because I interviewed some of my 10th grade students. Students they don't want to be talked down to, especially when they're teens. They don't want to be told what to read and what they cannot read. They literally love picking up books from all genres, from everything. But you know what makes me happy? They read. They're reading. Like, they'll literally they're getting inspired. They're opening their eyes. I have a student that told me She thought she wasn't smart enough to read back in the
Wow.
day. And then she picked up a book and she kept reading and she's like, wow, I can do this. This is wonderful.
They probably just made her pick up a book that was too literary and complicated
Yeah.
and not
And
like interesting at
listen,
all.
I'm all about, okay, you got to teach some classics. But what about new classics?
Yeah.
Come on, there's so many books coming out right now that have so many important lessons for this generation that I feel should be integrated into curriculums. And I, for example, had my students read Furia, which
Oh
is
yeah. Yeah.
so I wanted to give them something a little more diverse. And during the pandemic, the author came to our little Google Hangout and spoke to them, which was
That's
really
super
cool.
cool. What?
And they were like, wow. And they loved that book because it was very fun and diverse and interesting. Books impact kids more than you know. I see it every day. Not only that, they trade books with each other, they get excited, and that makes my heart happy. Don't tell a kid what they can and cannot read. Just let them read. That's my thought on it.
Which goes into the what about the book bans that are
Oh my
now
God.
happening?
Hi, I live in Florida, so you can
Oh
imagine
yeah.
South Florida. It's been very stressful. I don't agree with book bans. I'm not gonna even. I just don't agree with it. I think it's unfair that they're trying to ban books based on certain content, based on certain characters. Like, we're not cookie cutter in this world at all. We all have different perspectives, issues, backgrounds, and that goes back to me teaching a class about global perspectives.
Yeah.
Like, we're in a world where not everybody's the same as the person next to you. We need to embrace that. We need to grow. And we need to realize that kids need to learn about what's going on in the world, because if we shut that door and not let them pick up a book that they might relate to, what are we going to do? Right? Like, what lesson are we going to teach these children if we are telling them, don't read these books? I mean, I'm good friends with Romina Garber. She lives here in South Florida. She wrote Lobisona.
Mhm.
And hers was one of the books that was on a little cart to be banned at a library. And she's like, I don't get it. It's a fantasy book about an Argentine immigrant. Like, I'm trying to tell a story that so many people can relate to.
Yeah.
And there's fantasy in it. Then there's Kaylin Barron, whose Cinderella is Dead, also has been challenged. Aiden Thomas, Cemetery Boys, challenged. You know what I did? I brought those three into my classroom through Zoom, and I made them talk to my kids about how they can read whatever they want.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I just don't agree. I feel like a lot of us that are literary and understand the power of books, we don't agree with not letting kids read what they want to read. And that's how I feel.
No, for sure. I mean, even with books that may be problematic, I think it's important to explain to them why they are problematic. But
Yes.
to actively tell them, okay, don't read this, we're going to ban that from your hands. And sometimes, because that's the thing, like as I grew up, the only way I could get books was pretty much through the library.
Me too. The library and
the
trading
school
books
library, even
Yeah,
at first, because like my parents didn't really have money to buy me books except
Like-
for like special occasions.
Yeah,
Now imagine
like the holidays and stuff.
yeah, birthdays. Now imagine that you want to access a book and it's not available through your school library or through your library, and you also can't get it any other way. And
that's what scares me, because you're like limiting, you're closing doors on these kids that, let's begin, they can't afford books on the daily.
Yeah,
and
for
then
sure.
you're shutting the door on them and pretty much telling them we're not going to have them available for you, and that's really sad.
And also always targeting communities that are already being marginalized and which representativity there isn't as much on schools.
That stresses me out so much, because it's awful. And I really hope we can find a way to really beat this time that we're living in, because it's going backwards. We're not going
for
forward.
Sure.
And we need to go forward, and we need to realize we're in a different world right now. 100%.
For sure. It just makes me really sad, like that they're just really just targeting us, as happens with many platforms actually. Because if you think about, for example, TikTok, as soon as someone tags a video queer, a lot of the time it's going to be like shadow banned because it's queer, and immediately people associate queer with like eroticism or pornographic things or whatever. And it's just so sad to see that, and also to see this in the books, and to not allow kids to see themselves in books as well. It's very sad. So yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to write a book where people can see themselves, like teens can see themselves. I feel like it's so important to expand ourselves and our writing, to make sure kids have the ability to see themselves and learn lessons from books that they can relate to. 100%.
And I hope that with, in the next years, that maybe more understanding people will start taking certain positions that allow them to stop with the banning and stop with this.
100%.
It makes no sense.
I agree with you.
Aurora, where can people find you online?
Oh, sure. So I am on Twitter at Aurora Miami. I am on Instagram as Aurora Lydia. Those are the two, and it's Lydia with a Y. Those are the two that I am most active on. So come follow me. I will follow you back.
Yes, I will leave the link in the description of the episode. And now, this is the last question of the podcast, the most difficult question.
Ooh, let's go.
An all-time favorite book and a book you would recommend right now.
Oh my God. So recommend right now, definitely the Tiffany D. Jackson book, because I've been speeding through it. So let me give you the title because I don't have it in front of me right now, but I want people to know to get it because it's amazing. She's just a great author. It's called The Weight of Blood.
Do you know when it comes out?
It comes out September. September. So guys, set aside space in the bookshelf for that one. And it's hard to pick a favorite book, of course, but a book that really captured me when I was young, that I still consider a favorite book and I still own it, is Wait Till Helen Comes by Mary Downing Hahn. It was my favorite ghost story as a kid. Very subtle, very beautiful, and it still is my favorite ghost story today.
Very well. Well, again, I will leave this on the episode's notes. Aurora, thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to do this morning.
Yes, thank you. You can access today's show's notes via my pod page, which you can find along with all of my social media links at linktree/Karina Pereira. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting A Story of Sorts on Patreon. Patreon is a platform which allows you to contribute monthly to the podcast in exchange for extra content, such as early access to episodes, a shout out at the end of an episode and on Instagram, and choosing a theme for me to talk about on the podcast. You can become a patron at patreon.com/A Story of Sorts. Leaving a review would also be highly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to get a notification when the next episode hits. I'll talk to you then, and thank you for listening.